Hey guys, it's Jay Anthony and welcome back to the channel. Yes, I'm still alive, and I know it's been a long time since I put a video out, and yes, I have a dumb haircut thanks to COVID, but they want to kind of jump in and say hello to you guys again. I know I've been getting lots of messages and I appreciate it. I want to do a video on the perception of Rolex quality. You know, I've kind of instigated a little bit of this myself, but if you look online, Rolex kind of has a quality of being absolutely perfect in quality. They don't have a reputation for ever breaking or having issues that are, you know, kind of intrinsic to any sort of mechanical devices. And I was just kind of doing some, I guess if I was going to be kind to myself, reflection on all the Rolexes I've owned over the years and some of the quality issues I've actually had with them, because as some of you guys know, actually, I picked up a new watch recently, this Rolex Yacht-Master in platinum that I love, well, platinum and stainless. And I'll do a video on that really soon. Spoiler alert, I freaking love this watch. It's my favorite Rolex I've owned. But the reason that I have this watch wasn't actually planned. The reason I have it was, I mean, the end story is I got made an offer I couldn't refuse on my Sea Dweller. But the reason I was so, I guess, at ease with selling my Sea Dweller is honestly I had some disappointing quality niggles with it that kind of soured my taste with it. And I was kind of thinking back on that watch and the multitude of Rolexes that I've owned over the course of, I don't know, I want to say I got my first Rolex in 2006 or 7. It's been a long time. So let's say 14 years, as this year is basically over as I'm filming this. Happy holidays, by the way, guys, if you're watching this at this time. And I was thinking about all the issues that I've had with the Rolexes that I've had and watches in general. And I've had issues with over half of the Rolexes that I've owned, which was kind of, you know, interesting when I thought about it. Now, to be fair, the issues that I've had, by and large, I mean, there's been a couple that were pretty bad. But overall, they were kind of niggling quality issues, and they're just kind of things I just kind of ignored. But I'm OCD, I'll be straight up about it, and there are things that have irritated me a bit. And so I just kind of want to give you guys a little bit of my take of, you know, yes, Rolexes are stellar watches. Obviously, I keep buying them, and I love them very much, but to say that they're faultless or they never go wrong or Rolex quality is perfect, I don't think is an accurate thing to say, and I don't think that a lot of people really talk about some of the things that Rolex doesn't always get right, to be honest with you. So I actually have a list in front of me. I had to literally sit down and think of all the Rolexes that I've owned. Sorry, that sounds really snobbish. I don't mean it that way. You know, like most of you that watch me, regardless of what kind of watches you have, I mean, we tend to collect watches and go through a lot of them. So, you know, I started thinking about it, and as of my Yacht-Master now, if I include it, I'm up to 8 Rolexes if I ignore the Tutors. I've had a few Tutors as well, and even Tudor in themselves, my Tutors were fine, but I know even Tutors had some quality issues the last couple of years. The date issue with the GMT, for example, I know was a pretty widespread concern. The internet definitely picked up on that. But I was kind of looking at all the Rolexes that I've owned, and I was kind of getting a sense of a lot of these have had kind of dumb stuff wrong with them. And actually over half the Rolexes that I've owned, and again, 8 to this point, I've had some sort of niggling quality issue or serious problem. So to kind of give you the list, because I've had quite a range actually. I had a 16610 U Series Submariner date. I had that watch for 5 years. I know a lot of you guys ask me why I don't have a Submariner. I've owned a Submariner. I had it for 5 years. It was the classic style sub, the 16610. I just never fell in love with that watch. But one of the reasons I probably didn't fall in love with that watch, apart from the fact it was old school Rolex in terms of bracelet quality, was it just, I don't know. There was a little bit of an issue on the dial, and again, I'm OCD, where there was actually a dot on the dial, like a little color white dot. It was a speck, and it was stuck inside the dial. And it was, again, this is a totally genuine watch. I bought it from an authorized dealer. Everything about the watch checked out. But for whatever reason, Rolex Quality Control missed that watch when it left the factory. And it had this little tiny dot on the dial, and it just set my OCD off. Now again, a dot on the dial is no big deal. I totally understand this. But when you're spending this kind of money on something, honestly, I think you should expect perfection. And I've heard plenty of people online talk about how they've actually had like lint or like fingerprints inside their dials too, where they've actually seen, you know, like a little strand of hair or something underneath the crystal, or literally fingerprints, which I don't want this to sound like it's an epidemic. It's not. I mean, I shouldn't be using this word this year anyway. But it does happen, and it's kind of disappointing. And, you know, again, I had this watch 5 years, and I finally flipped it because I don't know, I never fell in love with it, but also, I'll be honest with you, that little dot on the dial just irritated me. It just seemed ridiculous to me that they couldn't get that right. So I know most of them never had that issue, but, you know, luck of the draw, I had one that did. As you'll see, though, as I go down this list, there are issues that are actually a lot more serious. The next watch that I had that was a Rolex was I had an S serial date just 16233. It was two-tone white dial with Roman numerals. I never should have sold that watch. It was perfect. I love it, and it's worth twice what I sold it for now, and I regret selling it. But I wanted to update it, so I ended up with an 1803 day date, which was gold, also white Roman. That watch too was great. So, you know, the first 3 watches that I had, the worst issue I can say is that, you know, my date just and my day date were great. My sub had some dot on the dial. So again, nothing really big. But if you've been following me for a while, you'll also know that I had a stainless steel Daytona. I had a 116520 P serial. It was I think a late 2000, early 2001 build. Aesthetically, the watch was great, and at least obvious fit and finish was fine, but that watch had 2 catastrophic movement failures in it. The totalizers on the chronograph just did not work. So I shouldn't say it did not work. It worked when I got it, and then within, I want to say a month or so, the secondhand counter, or excuse me, yeah, the counter, the totalizers, there's a totalizer that counts every minute the chronograph's been running. After about 5 minutes of counting, it would just go nuts, and it would just start counting like every minute as a second, and it just did crazy stuff. I sent it back, they fixed it, I got it back again. It was great for another 6 months or whatever it was, and it did the same crap again. They serviced it again. I kept it for another year, and it was fine, but because it had broken twice, I was kind of spooked, to be honest, and it was still under the Rolex warranty, but at that point, I didn't want to risk going through another situation where it was going to break. So I sold it for $8,500, I think, how many years ago? And dumbest thing I've ever done, because clearly that's an $18,000 watch now, so stupid me. I sold it at a loss, but the issues with the chronograph just drove me nuts. You know, full disclosure though, I know several people that have them, they've never had an issue. So again, this is probably just lucky me picking a bad watch. After that, I had my 16710 Coke GMT that's been on the channel a lot. Actually, all these watches have been on the channel. Some of these a lot further in the past. I think the sub started off in 2007 on this channel. So, but the GMT, honestly, I mean, it was older. It was an 89, I want to say. The watch was fine. The issue with the GMT was actually the dial was literally corroding. If you Google Rolex Stardust dials, they've kind of made this a thing now where it's cool. I had original dials. Obviously, the lume was no longer useful, but the dial was actually getting little like divots in it. And if I would have sent it into Rolex, they would have replaced it because the dial was starting to age. And you know, this is kind of, again, some people probably see this as a positive. You know, it's adding patina and it shows the history of the watch and the provenance and whatever. Somebody who's OCD found it annoying. It always kind of ate at me a little bit while I had that watch. It bothered me. And again, for what it was, and granted, Rolexes didn't used to be as expensive as they are today. To me, a dial, you know, doing that after 20 or 30 years is bad. And even Rolex knows it's bad because they fixed their design later on. But if you look at a lot of watches from the 80s and 90s from other manufacturers, they don't do that. That was something that was pretty common to Rolexes, and actually some in the mid 80s, they actually cracked the dials where you'd see like lines through the dial itself. So again, this is more of a minor issue, and it was an aged watch. So again, there's that caveat to it as well. But it is, again, to me, you know, if you're OCD and you're spending a lot of money on these things, it's kind of annoying that the dials over time kind of deteriorate at such a quick rate and in such an obvious way. After that, I got my 16570 Explorer 2, which I still own. It needs to get serviced, but that's nothing against Rolex. It's just an older watch. I think mine's a 95 probably. So I'm gonna get it serviced at some point. That watch has been great, so I have nothing to say negative about it. I still own it and I love it. But after that, before we get to my current Yacht-Master, which has been great thus far, the watch that really inspired me to put this video up is what happened to my Sea Dweller, which is honestly extremely disappointing to me still as I make this. The Dweller Deepsea that I had, and it's all over my Instagram, and then it's all over YouTube. I did a couple of videos on it. I compared it to a fake, and I did a full review on it. was kind of a dream watch for me. You know, I remember when it first came out in 2008, and at the time I couldn't have afforded it. They were really hard to get, and I didn't have, you know, 12 grand laying around to buy it at the time. But you know, I waited up, I found a really good one. It was just a few years old, box papers, everything, got it from an authorized dealer. It was great, right? Well, I should say an authorized secondhand dealer. I didn't buy it from Rolex, but I bought it from somebody that's very trusted, and I know the watch had been serviced through Rolex. That watch had two huge issues. One of them I actually have a picture of, which I can show you, which is this picture. And if you look at this picture, take a look at the bezel tip, and what you will see is that it is very, very badly aligned. It doesn't sit dead center in the triangle. It actually is far to the right. It's way off center. And again, I'm OCD, so I know this is probably a bigger deal to me than to most people. That drove me freaking nuts. The second I saw it, I could never unsee it. And again, for a watch that was over $12,000 new, I'm sorry, but that's freaking ridiculous. I was curious how widespread this issue was, and I've looked at several Rolexes made in the mid 2015 area-ish, you know, plus or minus a couple of years, and I've seen it on quite a few watches online, and I know other people in the forums have complained about it. You know, I get that Rolex has gone, you know, higher and higher volume over the years, but to me it is completely and utterly inexcusable that they can't align the lume pip in the center of the triangle. Like, that's just absurd to me. And the bezel itself never really lined up either. It was always slightly askew. And again, not a really big issue. And if it was on $150 Seiko, I'd be like, that's annoying, but it's a $150 watch. But when you're talking about a watch that, again, retails over $12,000, I'm sorry, but that's ridiculous. But the thing that put me over the edge on the Sea Dweller is it uses Rolex's in-house 3135. The same movement that's actually in my Yacht-Master, that was in my Submariner, that has been in a multitude of watches, is the 3185, 86 deviations, and the GMT, the Explorer, 3035 no dates. I mean, it's a great platform. But my watch was only a few years old. The wind function just stopped. I'm very gentle on my watches. I rotate them a lot. The watch wouldn't hand wind anymore. And I don't know what the heck happened to it, but you know, fortunately it was under a warranty at the time. But the watch wouldn't manually wind. And again, they're mechanical, watches break, but the misalignment of the bezel, the misalignment of the lume pip, and then the fact that a watch that's only a few years old, that's well within the initial service interval for a Rolex, as now having issues where it won't even hand wind to me, was just upsetting to me. So, you know, the watch was under warranty, I got it serviced and stuff, but that annoyed me, and the fact that the bezel and the lume pip were not right, I kind of lost love with the watch recently, and so when I got a really good offer on it, I flipped it, and I ended up buying this Yacht-Master, which again I'll do a video on soon. And for me it worked out because I've always kind of wanted a Yacht-Master, but I didn't want to buy one because I was worried that it wasn't going to be a good investment and all this nonsense. I should never have thought that way. It's my favorite Rolex I've had, and I'll talk about it later. So I know I'm being kind of nitpicky, I do, and I'm sure to some of you guys watching me this sounds pretty stupid. So, you know, of the 8 Rolexes I've had, 2 have had mechanical failures. So again, my Sea Dweller would not wind. My Daytona had 2 massive mechanical failures that had to get fixed. And then they've had a lot of niggling QC issues. Bezel's not aligned, the lume pip being off, the dial's corroding, the dial's having like a slight misprint issue on it. Dumb stuff, again, I know, but when you're paying this kind of money for things, you expect perfection. And you know, as you guys have watched me, I've reviewed hundreds of watches. I've owned, I don't even want to take a guess how many watches I've owned, Rolex and otherwise. You know, I've owned I've owned JLC, Omega, Breitling, Panerai. I can't even tell you at this point how many watches I've had. I've never had another watch brand where the bezel didn't line up outside of Seiko, and I've never had another watch brand where the bezel was misprinted outside of Rolex. The only other watch that I've had a mechanical failure on was a Navitimer Montblanc. And I had issues with that watch, so apparently me and chronographs just don't get along. But again, it does stand out to me that Rolex on some of this QC stuff, at least in the collections that I've had, have been worse than their competition. You know, so just, you know, from me to you, this is an opinion of, you know, one watch nerd to another. I'm sure you guys will probably find this laughable, but to me this stuff has been a little disappointing. But again, not enough to put me off the brand. I love Rolex. They're probably my favorite brand overall. I do think overall they're pretty rugged. I've had more issues with niggling OCD type stuff. And again, the Yacht-Master I'm in love with. So stay tuned for a video review on that. But I am, really curious, guys. Have you had issues like this with either Rolexes or other brands? And do you think I'm right to be annoyed about it? Do you think I'm, kind of taking this a little too seriously? If you do, that's totally fair. So, well, that said, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I will do a video on the Yacht-Master coming up soon. And then, maybe a couple videos here and there as they make sense. I just do this for fun. So I'll do this when I'm kind of in the mood for it. But I really appreciate all you guys' support and for watching my other videos. And if I don't see you before then, have a wonderful holiday this year. 2020 I know has been the year from hell for a lot of people. And I've weathered it quite well compared to most, and it's been painful for me. So I know a lot of you have been through far worse than I have, and I just really hope you guys are doing okay and have a wonderful holiday. And with all that said, if you like this, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't, let me know down below what I can do differently. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. And until we meet again, take care, and I'll see you probably soon. All right, later.